Okay, we have to completely interrupt this because there's no way I can discuss everything that I need to discuss over the remaining video while it plays. Statistics about cardiac arrest save rates are almost impossible to interpret. The most standardized thing that you can possibly use is something called the Utstein template. Not everybody uses it, so that kind of confuses things. I do have to note that a lot of times you can find individual city data, but it's very often hard to compare because they don't always use the same methods, and it's not always in the same place, different years, all sorts of problems with that. So I tried to use sources that were pretty much had all the data together compared the same way. Of course, there's year-to-year and study-to-study variation. But basically, the Utstein template says that your save rate is the percentage of arrests that are witnessed that are not caused by trauma, that have an initial rhythm of VFib, who are discharged from the hospital neurologically intact. Quite a mouthful, I understand. So we're going to look at some data grouped by who runs the ambulances in each city. There may or may not be a first response from the fire department. That first response may or may not be basic life support or advanced life support. The first thing we have is a little bit older data from a USA Today story that ran in 2005. You can see the link here. The actual numbers are trapped under a link to a Shockwave Flash movie that is entitled How 50 Major Cities Stack Up. I'm only covering cities that use the Utstein template. All of these data were self-reported by the individual agencies to the USA Today reporter. So here are how the fire department-based EMS cities stack up. There's half a dozen of them, and Seattle is pretty much known to be the nation's leader in cardiac arrest saves and pre-hospital emergency care in general. A couple of other numbers that are double digits, but half of these are down in the single digits. Now if we look at the non-fire EMS numbers, there's not a single one that's below 20%. Not exactly the kind of picture that they want you to believe about fire-based EMS. In fact, the average for the fire department comes out to be about 16%. The non-fire base is not quite double that. So let's move on to some 2008 numbers from the Journal of the American Medical Association. You can actually get that online, and in fact the specific data is down at tables 4 and 5. If you just scroll down, it'll take you to those. All of this data has been vetted by peer review. It was all crunched by professional statisticians, blah, blah, blah. However, it is somewhat limited in that the city name generally includes the surrounding area. There are more than one municipality being ranked with each given area. This means that there may actually be more than one type of EMS provider in that given region. However, from what I've seen, most areas are fairly homogeneous in EMS types of services. For example, Seattle is fire-based, but most of the regions around it are fire-based. I've worked in Pittsburgh a long time. Pittsburgh itself has a third service, ambulance service, and virtually every township and community around it has a similar setup. In fact, I can think probably on one hand, I can count the number of fire-based ambulance services around the city of Pittsburgh. Now, they did have a couple of mentions of Canadian cities in this study, and I did exclude those. I also excluded 2 whole states from this data. Because the data left were so sparse for just 5 cities, I've included both numbers for VF arrests and for the total number of cardiac arrests, not just the ventricular fibrillation ones. And the results are pretty consistent with what USA Today had. If you'll notice, Seattle, once again, the leader, actually in this study, they were tied with Milwaukee for VF arrests, but their overall arrest percentage of saves is much higher than Milwaukee. However, you'll still notice that Dallas has the most abysmal numbers on here, and that really drags the whole fireside down. So what does all this mean? Let's go back and hear the video again.
Documented survival rates for cardiac arrest patients are markedly higher for patients served by cross-trained, multi-role firefighters than for those victims served by providers in non-fire service-based systems.
Okay, to be perfectly honest, I have no idea how they can possibly make that assertion. If you know something I don't, please feel free to let me know and I will eat crow. Ultimately, what we look at and see is that the Seattle number being so high means that fire-based EMS can be done well, but the fact that there are so many low numbers suggests that it's not done as well as it should be.
For the public, it means you dial one number, 911. And no matter what's your emergency, you get the fire department. And the fire department is equipped and trained to handle that emergency, whether it's a fire, an EMS call or anything else. We are naturally deployed in virtually every community in this country, in every neighborhood in this country. Fire departments are deployed for rapid response. And if emergency response isn't fast, it's not emergency response. You know, we're not going to get any awards for same-day service. It has to be fast or it's not emergency.
Response time is also key in cases of traumatic injury. Here again, firefighters work together, performing extrication, rescue, and decontamination, simultaneously providing medical assessments and interventions.
Fire-based EMS puts the best things together with various disciplines needed in the community. If you need a response for fire, you need a response for EMS, for hazmat, for dive rescue, we have more or less a standing army that's busy doing many things, but at the same time, when we can add something as efficient as EMS and efficient to the citizens into our system, that's a benefit to the community.
I can think of no other systems that come with the complete toolbox, if you will, to handle whatever you can possibly encounter out of the hospital that requires emergency medical care. That is the head and shoulders advantage of fire-based EMS over any other delivery system in our country.
When it comes to multi-casualty emergencies, fire service-based emergency medical services are there.
During Hurricane Andrew down in Miami years ago, the private ambulances chose not to respond. That's a problem with systems that are not based in a public fire department like ours, where you have to respond. We are going to respond, that's our job, and that's one of the big benefits to the community of having EMS in the fire department.
The major change that needs to occur in EMS funding today is to move dollars to where the patient is taken care of. Today, fire-based EMS provides hundreds of thousands of patient care contacts every year that are uncompensated. That patient care is just as important as the transportation of that patient to the hospital. That patient care is just as important as the transportation of that patient to the hospital. That patient care is just as important as the transportation of that patient to the hospital.
Firefighters. When the community calls, they are there. 24 hours a day, every day of the year. When decisions are made at the national, state, and local levels of government, remember that the most common and effective means of delivering 911 emergency medical care throughout the nation is through fire service-based EMS systems. Policies that protect, support, and enhance the capabilities of fire service-based EMS systems are critical.